Look at that. Alright, pork ribs in the Weber Kettle. After our last pork rib video in the drum smoker, a few of you asked if we could do them in the Weber Kettle this time. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in this video. So let's get into it. Alright, so we're going to get started with our Weber setup. We're just going to make a nice big pile of charcoal or briquettes at one end of the Weber. If you've got a charcoal rail, put that in because it's just going to help it not collapse everywhere, but you'll be alright without it. And we're just going to leave a little space to the left where we're going to put about 12 to 15 nice red hot ashed over briquettes. If you don't have a chimney starter, just use a couple of fire lighters and that'll get it going. And then the rest of the Weber setup is pretty much exactly the same as what we've been doing in the other videos. We're going to leave our top vent wide open, and once we get around that 175 Fahrenheit in the pit, we're going to close our bottom vent down to pretty much closed, and that's going to stabilize us off at around that 250 to 275 degree Fahrenheit range, which is exactly where we want to be for this pork rib cook. Right, so one thing I forgot to mention in the Weber setup, it's pretty obvious, but just in case you don't know, since our charcoal's at the back, you want to make sure your lid vent's at the front. So all of that smoke and heat is coming up, over and passing through them pork ribs, and you've got that nice smoky flavour and that nice even heat going over your ribs. All right, and the smoking wood that we're using today, a nice big cherry chunk from Natural Smoke. You could use anything fruity or even something nutty like pecan. I like to use sometimes a combination of peach and pecan. You could also use something like nectarine, plum, applewood. Any of them fruity ones go really nicely with pork, so if you've got a favourite smoking wood, you can go ahead and chuck a chunk of that in. Alright, so now the Weber setup's sorted, we can move on to our pork ribs. So what you want to start by doing is just trimming off any hard excess fat. You might get lucky and find a rack of pork ribs that doesn't need any trimming at all, and then you can move on to the underside where we want to take that membrane off. So you want to get yourself a butter knife, and then we're going to go from the second rib in, we're going to move our butter knife right underneath that membrane, right up the top of the bone. We're going to give it a nice wiggle around. We're going to break that membrane, and then we're going to get some paper towel, which is going to help us grip the membrane. And then we're just going to rip it off, and hopefully we can do it all in one shot. Alright, so now we're trimmed up and that bottom membrane's off, it's time to season our pork ribs. We're going to be using Cosmos Q's Dirty Bird rub. It's a nice savoury rub. It does have some nice sweetness to it as well. So what we're going to start by doing is just giving our ribs a nice light coat in mustard. This is just going to help bind the rub, and then we're just going to give it a nice even coverage both sides. Alright, so now your ribs are trimmed up and seasoned. They're ready to go in the Weber, so you can go ahead and chuck them in. We're going to leave them for about an hour, and then we're going to check on them. If they're starting to look a little bit dry, we're going to spritz them with some apple cider vinegar, and then after that we're just going to leave them for about another half an hour to an hour, and we're going to be looking for that nice deep rich mahogany colour, so we'll come back a bit later on. Alright, so it's been about an hour 45 in total now. We've given it 2 spritzes, a really nice colour going on, so it's time to wrap them up in 2 layers of foil, some butter, brown sugar and some honey. Alright, so they're all wrapped up nice and tight. We actually put them back in meat side up. I've tried meat side down, meat side up, and I find there's not too much of a difference, but I do find that meat side up, you get to preserve that nice colour from the rub that you've used a little bit more. So we're going to leave them for about another hour and a half, and then we're going to get our instant read thermometer. We're going to probe around and we're going to check for tenderness. If they're not quite where we want to be within that 200 to 210 Fahrenheit mark, we're just going to leave them for a little bit longer. They might take 1 hour, they might take 2 hours, they might even take 3. We're just going to wait and see. You can't put a time on this stuff. That's why I like to use this method rather than the 3-2-1 method. If you smoke to colour, wrap until they're tender, and then glaze at the end, you really can't go too wrong. So we'll come back a bit later on and check them for tenderness. Alright, so our ribs have been wrapped up for about an hour and 45 minutes now. They're feeling really nice and tender when we're probing around, and they're sitting at about that 205 degree Fahrenheit internal mark. We did check them after an hour, but they were only at about that 185 degree Fahrenheit internal, and they weren't feeling very tender when we were probing around. So these are pretty much ready to get sauced and get into our final stage of this cook. So if you've got some barbecue sauce, save the wrap juices, you can mix that in there to thin it down a little bit. And it's a good quick way to heat up your barbecue sauce. So you can grab your favorite glaze or barbecue sauce and start getting that ready. All right, and now we're ready to baste our pork ribs. If you guys wanted to see the awesome homemade glaze recipe that we're using today, I'll link it to the end of this video, and I'll also put a card up above here for you to see as well. So make sure you check it out because it's absolutely perfect and it's so quick and easy to make too. All right, so because that sauce is quite thick and sweet, we're just going to give it one coat, but if you like yours extra saucy and sweet, by all means go ahead and give it a second coat. So we'll let it set for 5-10 minutes, and we'll come back, slice them up and serve them. Right, so our ribs are done. We'll have a quick taste. Perfect bite through. Bites away from the bone. Man, that flavour is just incredible. Look at that. So that's the end of the video. Highly recommend using this method. Great for beginners. You can't really go wrong. So if you like the video, don't forget to subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.